just joining. So yeah, we're going to be looking at nurturing an agile culture. So building on the previous 5 webinars that we've done and acting as a foundation for the future webinars as we go forward. So without further ado, let's go in and share the screen. Start having a look through a few slides. Normal sort of structure for this this session. We'll have a look at a few slides. We'll draw some pictures. No videos planned for this session. I might run a video if I think you know, if I think it's appropriate based on the comments being made, etc. But mainly have a chat through nurturing an agile culture, draw some pickies, hopefully have a bit of interaction on chat, all that sort of good stuff. So let's drive forward. Tooling familiarization. Apologies to those of you who've seen me go through this a fair few times. But yes, your microphones are set to off at the moment, obviously, because there's quite a few people on the webinar, 50 odd people. It's difficult to do that with the microphone on. If you want to raise a hand, that's great. I can see that. Or alternatively, what we normally do is we use chat. So if you set your chat setting to all panelists and attendees, it means that your comments can be seen by everybody on the webinar. So up to you. You might just want to communicate with me, in which case set it to all panelists, or you might want to set it to all panelists and attendees. So if we just give that a go, so if people can just have a go at raising things on chat, just saying hello, basically. So I can see a few people. Justine, Louise, hi. Cheryl Ann, yeah. So just have a go at raising something on chat. Brenda, hi, how's it going? Jared, brilliant, yeah, good to see you again. Shay, hi, how's it going? Yeah, fantastic stuff. Doug, Kleber, fantastic stuff. Yeah, excellent, good. Hello from Surrey. Yep, hello, back to Surrey. Digital lockdown, yes. Hi, Karthik. Yeah, hi, Karthik again. Yeah. So, okay, welcome back. And let's drive forward. And everybody's obviously got the chat sorted. Brilliant. Okay, so again, quick overview of myself. I was I'm now the chairman and founder of a company called RadTac. RadTac's one of the premium agile services providers in the world. International company, multi-million pound company. I started that in '98. Since then, it's grown to yes, something of it's a wonderful company. Started in IT in about 1983. Yeah, since 1994, been specialising in what is now called Agile. Agile used to be called, generically, Agile used to be called RAD, if anybody remembers that long ago, before 2001, basically. RAD stood for Rapid Application Development. Agile is a much better term for what we do in Agile, but generically, this sort of stuff used to be called RAD, and that's actually why RadTac's called RadTac, Rapid Application Development, Training and Consultancy. So we were around before Agile became known as Agile. So I've been specialising in Lean, Agile, Kanban, all that sort of good stuff, acting as a transformation consultant worldwide. Certified in all sorts of different stuff. I won't bore you with all the details. I'm certified in a lot more than just what's on this particular slide. Ex-director of a consortium, a not-for-profit consortium called DSDM, if anyone remembers that. What is now the Agile Business Consortium. I'm a fellow of the Agile Business Consortium, lead author editor of the Agile Foundations book, which we can see here on this particular screen, and an ex-adjunct professor of Agile Project Management at Hull University in London. So just a brief overview of myself. So what we're going to be looking at today is this really, nurturing an agile culture. So what is culture? Recognizing agile culture. We've actually talked a fair bit about recognizing agile in previous webinars, but we'll have a quick look at that again. The Schneider culture model, just one way of defining a culture and what the agile view onto the Schneider culture model is. The organizational iceberg, again, we looked at that very quickly in webinar 4, but look at a bit more detail in this webinar 6 in relation to agile cultures, the sort of things we need to think about. Continually evolving culture, obviously, you know, implement agile using agile, vertical slicing. I'll talk about that. The importance of creating a safe environment. Yes, if you want to get any change in place, you really need to have a safe environment. I'll probably build into that a bit more in later webinars as well. Actually, you know, I'm going to do a webinar we can see here, how to be an amazing Scrum Master on August the 5th. I'll definitely be talking there about, you know, ideas for how to create a safe environment. But for now, the key thing to understand is if we want to nurture an agile culture, you've got to have a safe environment whereby people, you know, and teams will self-organize and the trust's in place so we can actually innovate and be creative. So I'll have a look at that. Deliberately development organizations, so deliberately developing ourselves and other people in the organization. We'll have a look at that. That's really good for an agile culture. Fifth discipline, I've talked about systems thinking a bit, talk a bit more about that, but really in the context of culture again. And then the 11 laws of systems thinking. So that's broadly what I'm planning to go through today. So hopefully that's of interest. And then later ones, overview of the major scaling agile frameworks, 24th of June, building awesome products and outstanding outcomes. So thinking about, sort of more of a product owner plus, I suppose you might say, thinking about as organizations, what sort of things do we need to have in place to enable that to occur? Obviously, an absolutely key part of that is innovation and creativity, arguably the core of Agile. So I'll be talking about that on Wednesday, 22nd of July, possibly with another guy called Stuart Young, who's very much an expert in this area from Rantac. And then how to be an amazing Scrum Master, August 5th, and then I'll be doing further ones after that as well. So without further ado, let's get into the one we're doing now. So why business agility? So let's have a look at this. Well, again, I've gone through this at different levels of detail in all the webinars. I'm not planning to go through it in any great detail here because I think some of you have probably been at previous webinars. It's a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. The modern world, it changes all the time. Certainly the modern business world changes all the time. If I look at my journey since 1998, when forming Rantac, to now, 2020, the business we operate in is infinitely different. It was a lot more static back in the day. Nowadays, everything changes all the time. So it's a VUCA world. We need to use business agility to enable our business to survive in that VUCA world. That's the bottom line. Yeah. Now, again, if you have a look at the recordings of previous webinars that I've done, you'll see me talking a lot more about the VUCA world, etc., especially webinars 1 and 2. So if you want a bit more detail in that area, I would suggest have a look at webinar 1 and 2. Yes, I always show this cartoon. I like this cartoon. The nightmare of COVID that we're sadly still going through at the moment, and probably will be quite a while. Yeah, I mean, sometimes called a black swan, as I've mentioned before. If you want to understand black swan events, look for a guy called Taleb, Taleb. Have a look at that. So yes, black swan events like COVID-19. If your organization, your business doesn't have the ability to be agile in that scenario, it's going to be very, very difficult, especially if you're competing against other organizations that are agile. And then the last thing I've been looking at on many of the webinars, sometimes showing the clip that we can see here on the right-hand side. Not planning to show it today because I've shown it a few times before, but this is the World Economic Forum talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age, moving on from that scenario. So I would highly recommend you to have a look at that YouTube clip, have a look at the World Economic Forum, and do some work in having a look at the fourth industrial revolution. I must admit, off the top of my head, I can't remember the seminal guy who wrote the book on It's the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but it was a few years ago, two or 3 years ago. And in my opinion, and I think most other people's opinions, this is definitely the way the world is going. Once again, if we need to have a business to survive and just to thrive and be absolutely dynamic and brilliant in the fourth industrial revolution, we've got to be agile across the business, not just IT, agile across the business. So a number of reasons there. As I say, I dived into that in a lot more detail in earlier webinars. So what is culture? What is culture all about? So once again, I quite typically get absolutely brilliant people in these webinars. We get some really great comments. So on the chat, what, in your opinion, defines a business culture? So comments on chat, please. And hopefully we'll get some really good stuff like we have done previously. So I'm just going over to the chat site. Yes, Yusuf, I think it was a Schwab book, if I remember rightly. Yes, but yeah, brilliant. Okay, so what is culture? A set of behaviors from Angle or Angel? Yes, certainly. Makes sense to me. A set of behaviors that we do within our business. Set of beliefs, absolutely. Yeah, beliefs, traditions, that sort of good stuff. So culturally within our business, we believe this. Culture is how we do things here. Yeah, ways of working, absolutely. Owen, Wimpey, Charlotte, a way to behave and help us make decisions. Hey, that's a really interesting one. Some of you might have heard the concept of what's called values-based management. IBM is a very famous company that has always used values-based management. The idea is that we set some high-level values in the business, and then we assess everything that goes on in the business against those values. So values-based management, yes, absolutely. All right, brilliant. So some good ideas there of what a culture is. So Joshua, how we work together in the business for better or worse. Yeah, I like that one, for better or worse. Yeah, fantastic stuff. The way we do things from Craig, yes. So yeah, great chat comments again. So yeah, I agree. What you are identifying as a business culture is broadly what I would be thinking about as a business culture. So let's just look at a bit of definition. Yeah. very similar to what you were saying, actually. How we get how things get done around here. In fact, that's near as damn it exactly what one of our friends on chat said, if I remember rightly. The personality of the organisation, the personality of the organisation, how we feel in the organisation, what we choose to celebrate and what we choose to tolerate. Sort of makes sense. What happens when nobody's looking? Definitely. We talk in Agile about being Agile and doing Agile, certainly in business agility and the culture of agility. What we mean there is that the people who are doing Agile, it's not just about doing Agile, it's about people understanding why they're doing Agile, yes? So it's about being Agile. It's that core understanding of this is why we do this, this is our culture, this is how we work. So therefore, if the Scrum Master goes on holiday or whatever, it's not as though the daily scrums just stop or the retrospectives just stop. People understand why we're doing it, they understand the benefits of it, and therefore it's in our culture. We do it culturally within the business, and these things keep driving forward. It's these sorts of things, the sorts of things you were raising there. So, a clear direction of travel. I think any business needs to have a clear direction of travel, not described in a huge amount of detail, business agility, but we need to understand what the vision is. Where are we aiming? What direction of travel have we got? The values, yes, I think every business needs clear values, values-based management. The norms, yes. So what's the normal behaviour that we expect within our business? What do we choose to celebrate? What do we choose to tolerate? Yes, certainly. Symbols, pictures, very important. How we represent ourselves to ourselves, and obviously from a marketing perspective, and the importance of marketing, how we represent ourselves to the outside market. Language that we use. Yes, absolutely. Assumptions, beliefs, habits. So all of these sorts of things that you were raising, really define an organizational culture. So, possibly climate versus culture, a business climate, an organizational climate versus a business culture. So culture, how we get things done, the personality of the company. Whereas the climate, what it feels like to work here, the mood of a department or a team. So, the difference there between the culture and the climate, how we get things done, what it feels like to work here. Obviously, the culture and the climate, it's going to be a self-sustaining iterative cycle. The climate will change the culture and the culture will change the climate. So we need to be constantly, as a business agility expert, we need to be constantly being aware of both of those things and also being aware of reinforcement cycles and behavior modes within the business. So climate versus culture. So what's the big deal about culture? Is it important? Should we just have processes and tools and people do what they're told? Or, should there be a clear culture about how the business pushes forward? Well, certainly in my experience, I'm going to look at a figure here from the 13th, if I remember rightly, Agile report. Culture, a culture which isn't supportive of an Agile way of working or an Agile transformation even, 52% of people who replied to the version 1 13th annual State of Agile report said that culture was the top barrier to Agile success. That is also my experience. So, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a few seconds. I'll draw a diagram of this in a few seconds. So the bad news is top barrier to Agile success. The good news is that we can do something about it. Yeah, the good news, and we're going to have a look at a few ideas on this webinar. The good news is that we can move that culture along. Where we have a strong corporate culture, this is some data from somebody called James Heskett, author of a book called The Culture Cycle, which some of you may have heard of. 20 to 30% boost in corporate performance, at least, is my practical experience. Within RadTac, we have a very, very strong culture. Everybody feels safe to say things, etc., etc. So I think that's one of our biggest assets. So having a strong culture is a good thing. It has a very serious impact on the bottom line. Now I'm just going to skip out of here and just look at this in a bit more detail. So I'm going to stop the share here, and I'm going to go in and share my drawing pad. So just bear with me 1 minute, please, whilst I do this. Oops, so it helps to put the right password in, of course. That might be useful. Don't. Okay, so let's where are we? There we go. So hopefully we're now seeing the drawing pad. I just wanted to have a look at here a little bit about culture and how it can block us if we're trying to transform to Agile, or if we're trying to continually implement Agile. By the way, in my experience, there is a difference between business agility and Agile transformation. Now, some folks would say there's no such thing as Agile transformation. You just need to continuously improve for business agility. Okay, I can see that as an argument, but it's not an argument I personally agree with. My practical experience over the last 20 years or so is that, yes, we want to get to business agility. We want the innovation, the creativity, we want the continuous improvement, we want the short feedback cycles, all the great stuff we have in business agility. But many organizations, we also need to move the culture. We need to move the way the business works. And that's the Agile transformation. So in other words, the initial Agile transformation gets us to a state that the business then continues in a business Agile way. I have worked with organizations where we can morph it, because I won't mention the organization, but I used to work with a gaming company, the people who wrote Sonic the Hedgehog for Sony. It wasn't Sony, it was people who were actually writing Sonic the Hedgehog, a gaming company. They were broadly Agile. They didn't realize it, but they brought us in to have a look at what they were doing and what we would suggest as a good business operating model for their business. And they were operating in a broadly Agile way. So in that situation, we didn't really need to do an Agile transformation because they already were Agile. In that situation, we just kept the continuous, we kept the continuous improvement going. So business agility, Agile transformation. Yeah. So I'm going to look here really at something which relates to both. I think I did a very quick overview of this on one of the earlier webinars, but just to remind ourselves, because it is so key. So here's a business. So within our business, we're going to have departments or parts of the organization, whatever. Maybe this is the sales and marketing department, perhaps. Maybe this is the purchasing department. Maybe this is the information technology or digital department, whatever we want to call it. This is the purchasing, perhaps. This is the business admin, etc., etc., etc. So we have certain parts of the organization. We've also got projects happening, programs of change happening, all that sort of good stuff. Now, what can sometimes happen is we try and implement any change. I'm not talking specifically about Agile here, but it is also true for Agile transformations. We try to implement a change just in one part of the organization. So certainly true of Agile, I think back in the day, many organizations started to raise, Agile programs, Agile projects in their digital part of the business, or their IT part of the business. Now, that's sort of going the right direction. It's trying things out. It's seeing if things work. But the difficulty there, very typically, will be you've started to culturally transform part of the organization, but the rest of the organization don't really understand what the hell's going on. And certainly as far as the existing culture is concerned, they really do not understand what's going on. They don't recognize it. So the risk is, thinking about an organization as a human body, the risk is the existing organization will see these things as antibodies. We'll see these new Agile things, programs, projects, whatever they are, continuous developments, as antibodies, and they'll attack them. So it becomes very, very difficult to get financing from the finance department, for example, without 84 gazillion documents, because that's the way we've always done it. Whereas Agile is saying, well, don't do that now. Yeah. So it becomes very difficult. It becomes very, very difficult to employ the appropriate people, because the HR department don't understand who the appropriate people are. And they've always worked in this way, and they see no reason to change that way of working because they don't understand why we should change the way of working. So this can be a very challenging way to try and drive any transformation, and certainly an Agile transformation. What we're far better off doing is a concept that's called vertical slicing, which is a concept from Agile. If you were going to develop an IT system or a digital capability, for example, you would vertically slice it. But if you're going to implement business agility, then we should also be vertically slicing. So what we would do there is we would look at the value chains, in the business, and we would concentrate the change down the whole value chain. So not just the IT department or the HR department or the sales and marketing or whoever. We would think about what's the value that our customers get from us. And by the way, just as a very quick comment, very typically the value that the customer gets from us is very different to the value that we think we're providing. So, we do need to get customers involved, all the good stuff that we'll look at in later webinars about understanding who the customers are, innovation, creativity, design thinking, making sure we're focused on what the customer wants. So yes, identify where the value is. What we then do is start to drive the change in that way. What we would then do is use factual evidence to start to do the next vertical slice, then use more factual evidence to do the next, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we tend to drive forward in this way. So vertical slices. This is a concept that I've called for many, many years, and I don't know if it's me who came up with this concept or not, to be honest, but viral transformation. It's probably somebody else who came up with it, and I just heard it. But it is like viral transformation. What we're doing here is we're transforming a part of the business, we are measuring it, and we are showing the fantastic success that we've had. What we're then using is that fantastic success to basically sell the concept to other parts of the business. What we're also doing here is we're not trying to change everything all at once, because if you could imagine, if you're a director or you're the CEO, CDO, CMO, whatever, and somebody is saying, hey, look, let's change all the business all at once, that is a, whoa, hold on there, honcho. That's going to be a really high risk thing to do. And it's going to cost a lot of money. So it's big, it's scary. Oh, no, we don't like this. So, implement Agile in an Agile way, vertical slicing, use a viral transformation approach. And this is the way we start to drive the cultural change forward, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail in a few minutes. Okay, so let's skip out of here. Let's skip out of this particular area. Let's skip back into the slides we were looking at. And I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat, because I think there might be one or two comments on here. So from Yusuf, one of the cultural challenges is some horizontal functions may want to go faster. Do you tell them to stop? That is a brilliant question. Now, again, I'll probably do some later webinars more on transformational change rather than Agile per se. Yes, you start to get into the concept of what's called the change wave there. The difficulty with the change wave is if you set up a very steep change curve, you try and do everything all at once. The risk is that as you start to communicate out the brilliant success of a vertical slice, everyone else goes, holy crap, this is absolutely brilliant. We've all got to do it now. And everybody starts doing it all at the same time. What then happens is the change wave basically goes, it collapses like a wave. So, we don't want people to stop, but we do need to make sure that we understand what's actually going on. Yeah, Karthik, Big Bang approach doesn't fly well. In my experience, and I'm only talking from my experience, but if you try and use a Big Bang traditional approach to do any sort of transformational change, it won't work. The only way to make transformational change work is using an Agile styled approach. Why? Because transformational change is VUCA. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So that's my personal experience. And that does also align with people like Professor John Cotter. It's, I suppose you might consider Cotter as the dude when you're talking about change, Professor John Cotter. His landmark paper and book is called Leading Change. So he talks about, Agile and using Agile thinking for transformation as well. So yes, no, I wouldn't tell people to stop, Yusuf, but we do need to have an understanding of what is going on. What we don't want is loads of stuff firing off all over the place, because that's going to cause, all sorts of problems. And the change wave, the risk is the change wave will collapse. And then once the change wave has collapsed, it's really, really difficult to get that change wave going again. So once again, I'll probably talk about this in a bit more detail on a later webinar. So yeah, brilliant comment. Thanks very much. Top notch. Okay, let's keep driving. Driving forward a bit. So we're looking at that slide. So business culture. Why is understanding the business culture important? So in your experience, what's the point? What's the point of understanding the business culture? So once again, I'll go back to chat, and if you can just raise some ideas on there, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And it gives me the opportunity to drink some of my blackcurrant juice. Excuse me. So why is understanding the business culture important before we do any transformation? Before we move towards something like business agility, for example. And yeah, no transformation should be Big Bang, in my experience. All transformation should be following an Agile styled approach. So we know where we are. Yeah, definitely. We need to know where we are culturally, understanding the current state, the problems that exist currently. That's a really interesting one. So, from a transformational perspective, it's really, really difficult to get anyone to transform if they don't understand where they are now. Now, again, that is definitely my practical experience, but it is also what the gurus say. I mentioned, Professor John Cotter. He talks about an eight-step change process, and step number one in the eight-step change process, what he calls remove complacency. So that's about the business understanding where they're fitting in the market, and understanding what they do now. Yeah, because culture says we eat strategy for breakfast. Yeah, that's again a famous book. Good stuff. Yeah, team will be excited if we set a direction of travel. Understand which functions are already agile minded. Yeah, Sherilyn, brilliant. Yeah. So you can have understand the lay of the land from Joshua. Some business culture may not be ready for certain movement. Definitely. So we'd be looking at change readiness analysis. We'd be looking at change fatigue. Change fatigue. Yes, I mean I talk. For those of you who were there at webinar 2, I was talking about practical experience and what we RadTax see as the business agility principles and business agility transformation principles. But if you remember, one of the transformation principles was set the land before seeding it. So in other words, what we mean by that is before you actually start to drive the transformational change, understand the lay of the land and understand what seeds are likely to germinate and what aren't. So you need to understand, how to communicate what at what points, and yes, be able to counteract negativity. So once again, some brilliant chat comments there. Thank you very much, greatly appreciated. So let's have a look at some ideas around this area. Just bear with me a minute. There we go. So key points around culture. Yeah. So my view is culture is like the water. Yeah, it's like the water to a fish. It's there and it's pretty vital for your well-being. And everybody knows that there's a culture there, but it might not be instantly recognizable to everybody. It's just something that's there, even if you don't realize it. Shifting culture is key to the sustainability of anything. So any transformational change. We would hope in the agile world we're doing small step transformational change. That's also true in the Kanban world. That's really what we want. The sustainability of that change is going to depend on the culture. It takes time to shift an organizational culture. Don't wait. Do it in small chunks. Do it in vertical slices. So let's think about this. So we've set a basic understanding of what is a culture. So let's start moving now into a few ideas. Once again, we've only got a 1 hour webinar here. So, we can't talk about everything, obviously, in this area. It's a very, very big arena. But I'll just talk about a few ideas in this area. Yeah. So what sort of things could nurture an agile culture for us? So I mentioned we'd have a look at the Schneider culture model. I'm sure some of you have seen this before. It's pretty, it's robust, solid stuff. It's been tried out many times. I think it was mid-90s, if I remember rightly, when this came out. So Schneider is talking here about one view of a business culture. So we could be very company oriented or we could be very people oriented. So there's our sort of horizontal axis. We could be very reality oriented or we could be very possibility oriented. So there's our vertical axis. And if you think about where the culture would sit, well, if we had a very strong control culture, it would mean we're very strongly reality oriented and company oriented. If we had a very strong collaboration culture, it would mean we're strongly reality oriented, people oriented. Yeah. So we've got a number of different things here. So let's just have a look at these. Have a look at these in a little bit more detail. Again, this is a big area we're talking about here. So a control culture. Yeah. So rather than just reading the slide, just pull out a few points. Yeah. All work is mainly based on data and objective analysis. Excuse me. Leaders tend to be directive and authoritative. Jobs tend to be focused on functional needs rather than value chains. The archetype that people quite regularly mention when talking about a very heavily controlled culture is the military, which is very interesting. I've been thinking about this over many years and I haven't really come up with an answer because in my experience, yes, the military does have a controlled culture, certainly when they're in barracks or whatever. However, the military is also the archetype of agile. If you go into a theatre of war, the reason why military people form such strong working teams and very, very strong trust, they do a lot of work around the cultural trust and all that sort of thing, is when you go into a theatre of war, your plans get thrown out the window. Planning is essential, but the plans sort of blow up immediately as soon as you go to a theatre of war. So they're actually very agile as well. So it's quite interesting. It's a strong command culture, but very, very agile. So a control culture, command and control culture. Competence culture. So the competence culture is really striving for uniqueness, distinction, something that's very innovative, creative, Typically, you get people in these particular organisations who are absolute experts in the arena. Can be very intense, very competitive, which may be good depending on the environment within which you are working. So yes, Karthik, how come command and control can coexist with agile? Good question. Don't know the answer. So I keep meaning to look at the military in a lot more detail to answer this question for myself, because I think it's a very interesting question, because as I say, the military must be agile, because that's what they need to do when they go into a theatre of war. So it's an interesting point for me. I haven't got an answer to that one at the moment. My gut feel is because they do a huge amount of training in the foundations of an agile culture. My youngest son is a military person, and I know they do a huge amount of training for how to operate as an effective team. The sort of stuff you would, well, certainly I recognise in agile thinking. So it's an interesting point. So competence culture. So we've looked at a command culture, competence culture, collaboration culture. No great surprise there. Strives for collaboration. So affiliation to things. The archetype of this would be something like a family, or a sports team, perhaps, or a military team in a theatre of war, perhaps. Highly collaborative. Employers generally encouraged to be more generalists. So whereas here at competence culture, we want people to be specialists, here we want people to be generalists. Agile, we want people to be specialized generalists. If you look at a previous webinar, I've gone into that in a bit more detail, but just very quickly, the idea of a specialized generalist or T-shaped person, and this can also be an M-shaped person as well going into the future, but a T-shaped person or a specialized generalist it is quite typical that somebody would have a specialist skill. If we use information technology as an example, it'd be quite typical somebody's an expert Java architect maybe, or there might be an expert C++ programmer or whatever. Yeah. So they're an expert in something. However, we want teams to be producing value for the business in a continuous way. So those people also need to have the ability to work together as a team. So working together as a team, they need to have generalized skills as well. So they might be specialized in this area and possibly that area maybe, but they've also got generalized skills. So, a football team, which is the archetype for collaboration, highly collaborative. However, you would also expect the centre forward to have particular specialist skills, the goalkeeper has particular specialist skills. So they're actually specialized generalists. Yeah. So a collaboration culture. And then a cultivation culture strives for meaning, making a contribution. Leaders act as catalysts. Potential employees, et cetera, emotional giving, quite typically unconventional, value driven, these sorts of things. So we're going to be concentrating on cultivating, certainly what I would call our best asset, which is our people. Yeah. So very much a cultivation culture. So thinking about that, what would that suggest to us then? So we've got a number of different cultures there. It would be interesting to look at this from a perspective of agile. In other words, thinking about the agile culture, on the culture model, where would we expect the focus to be in agility? Very high control, perhaps, or very, very high cultivation or competence or whatever? Well, luckily for us, somebody's done some work on this. A guy called Michael Spade did some work on this. This is quite a while ago, about 20 years ago now. So it's good, solid, well-tried stuff. It's been around for a while. And as we can see here, in essence, what Spade did was he used Snyder's model, and he asked a number of people working in the agile world what they thought. So, where should the focus be? And we can see here, probably no great surprise, the culture of an agile business agility should be largely focused around collaboration and largely focused about cultivation, self-organizing teams, all the stuff we've talked about on the previous 5 webinars, all that sort of good stuff. Control, well, there'll need to be an element of control. We need to make sure that we're all going in the same direction. We don't want everybody flying off in totally different directions all the time. So an element of control. Competence, yeah, absolutely. Specialized generalists. It's quite typical we would want people who specialize in certain arenas to enable our business to operate effectively. Yeah, so these things aren't bad. Control and, for example, where would control be really, really strongly required? Well, if I was if I was a nursery teacher, let's say, and I'm interacting with a load of 5-year-old kids at nursery, maybe, and we're going to walk along a main road and cross over to a library, I wouldn't want those 5-year-olds to be self-organizing collaboration and cultivation. I would want those 5-year-olds to operate within a highly controlled environment, so I can be absolutely convinced that they're safe when they're next to the road. So it's not a case of, collaboration, control, cultivation, competence are good or bad. It's a case of thinking about what's more suited. Well, business agility to operate in the VUCA world, collaboration and cultivation. That's what Spade found, and again, that certainly aligns with my experience. Now, again, I think I've just answered this question, so there's probably not lots of point asking. I'll tell you what, I'll ask the question and see what anybody comes back with, rather than me just rabbiting on all the time. So, why is collaboration and cultivation so important for nurturing agile culture? Again, if we can just go on to chat, that would be awesome. And if any of you have any views on this, that would be absolutely brilliant. So Joshua, SAS, Special Air Service, a good example to look into when it comes to self-organisation in the military. Yeah, that is my experience. The more, what's the word? The more experienced, is that the right word maybe, for the SAS or the SPS or Delta Force or whoever? Yes, the more you go into that, the more self-organisation you see, and the less there is command and control. Actually interesting. Why do you think cultivation ranked higher than competence? Again, I don't know. Owen, great question, thank you. I don't know the direct answer to that. However, my view would be, when we're working in an agile organization, we want a purposefully developed organization. So we want to cultivate brilliant people and enable them to be brilliant. I mean, one of the values in RadTac is, we employ brilliant people, and then we enable them to be brilliant. We put in place that which then enables them to be brilliant. So the leaders in RadTac are in essence about enabling brilliant people to be brilliant. And quite a bit of that is just about getting out of the way. So that would be my guess why cultivation is ranked higher than competence. But I think it depends on the business you're operating within. There is no right answer. Yes, so why is collaboration? And yep, so being assertive as well as cooperative. Yeah, certain circumstances, that's our direction of travel. So, that's not for negotiation, for example. Give space for people to be innovative and explore new paths. Yeah, great one. Tina, Elena, great stuff, yes. Joshua, we get the best of everyone in the team instead of the best and worst of one senior person. Yeah, definitely agree with that one. I showed a video from Steve Jobs. I think it was in webinar 3, if I remember rightly, webinar 2 or 3, where he was talking very clearly about, his rationale in Apple was always employ brilliant people, and his view was, if you employ brilliant people and then you tell them what to do, you don't collaborate with those brilliant people, they'll leave. That's my experience as well. There's no point employing brilliant people and then not collaborating with them and not cultivating their capability. So yeah, that's certainly my experience. So again, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, this is. I like this as a statement. Again, I'm not going to read the statement. You can see the statement on the slide there. So this is from Dharmesh Shah, who's a co-founder of HubSpot, and what he is saying here to me is that it's about iterating. So vertical slices. Once we have gone through a level of transformation to get to business agility, it's then about continuous improvement. It's about continuing to improve our culture, continue to improve our capability, obviously continue to improve our products and services. I mean, that's, Agile's all about understanding what the customer wants and then delivering to that need. So yes, interesting statement there. I said we'd have a look at fixed and growth mindset. Again, there's a lot of stuff in this area, mindset. So I'm just going to look at one element. Yes. I think this is a good book from Carol Dweck, Mindset, as the title of the book suggests, mind set. So you can change the set of the mind. The New Psychology of Success. Yeah, I found this very useful. 2 million other people found it useful. So it's sold more than that now. But when I took this image, it was 2 million. So yeah, fixed. Basic qualities are fixed. Talent alone creates success. You've either got it or you don't. That's a fixed mindset. You've either got it or you don't. You can't learn anything. You can't evolve. You're either brilliant or you're not, sort of thing. Growth. Most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent just a starting point. That's my experience. So my practical experience of running a business I'm not the CEO of RadTac now, but I was for about 18 years. My practical experience of running a business, we want to take people on who are brilliant or have the capability to be brilliant and then enable them to be brilliant. So yeah, definitely my experience. So yeah, this is a good quote from Ed, the Pixar co-founder. I'll read through this one if that's all right, because I think this is such a good one. Failure is a manifestation, if I can read it. Failure is a manifestation of learning and exploring if you aren't experiencing failure. Definitely. Then you're making a far worse mistake. You're being driven by the desire to avoid it, as in avoid failure. And for leaders especially, this strategy, trying to avoid failure by outthinking it, dooms you to failure. That's definitely my experience. You know, if we're going to be working in creative, innovative organizations, and hey, the bottom line nowadays in a very, very competitive market that's VUCA for the fourth industrial age, if we're going to be working in markets like that, we have to be creative. We have to be innovative. What is creation in innovation? Making mistakes. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. So thinking about this fixed versus growth mindset in our culture, we very much want to be, you know, pointing really at the positive growth. So in other words, we don't believe that ability is just static. This person can do this and they can only do this and they can't do anything else. And, you know, we want to enable people to grow. The goal, a fixed mindset of the goal is I always need to look good. You know, whatever I do, I always need to look good. So I'm never going to take any risks. I'm never be creative because I'm running the risk I won't look good. The goal in a positive growth mindset is if it fails, it's about learning. It's about learning. Yeah, very important business culture to have in place for agility, business agility. Fixed mindset is, well, I need to look good, therefore I'm going to avoid all challenges. I really do not want challenges. Again, that's very high risk. Whereas the positive growth mindset is, I want challenges. I want new challenges. I want to embrace those challenges. I want to grow into new things. Certainly the people we look for, or I've always looked for that I want to work with, people who are interested in continuous learning, growing their capability. Fixed mindset, failure defines you. Oh my God, I've failed at this. Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to get over this. Oh. No, not at all. Failure provides information. Failure provides growth. So obviously what we don't want to do is spend a year, 5 years, 10 years or whatever, and then failing. You know, traditional businesses, creating products and outcomes. What we want to do is evolve our products and outcomes, our transformation, identify where the failure is. That provides the information, the fast feedback cycle. We can then learn from that information. Now, I've mentioned a book numerous times in these webinars, which I'll just mention it again. The book is called Lean Startup, and I always get this guy's name wrong. Definitely Rees. I'm 99% sure it's Eric Rees, but it might be Jeff Rees, but I'm 99% sure it's Eric Rees. Yes, Lean Startup. So this talks about this idea of basically pivot, experiment and pivot. You know, successful companies, definitely in the VUCA world. Yeah, Eric Rees. Thanks, Karthik. Thanks for being paid. So Eric Rees, yes. So he talks about how successful companies, certainly the big companies you see nowadays, the big digital companies you see nowadays, yeah, they're continually learning. And then reaction to challenge is helplessness, whereas a positive growth mindset is reaction to challenge is resilience. Yeah. Again, not planning to read this one out, but again, I'm going through this stuff pretty quick, but hopefully you're getting some value. I'm going to have a look at something I've mentioned a few times during this webinar, deliberately developmental organizations. The idea from Keegan and Leahy Lasco. So yeah, the point they're making in this statement is we don't really want people focusing on the negative. We don't want people focusing on those fixed mindsets. Oh my God, I need to worry about looking good. I need to worry about avoiding challenges. I need to, oh, I can't fail. You know, wasting all that emotional effort and all that time thinking about this. We want them to concentrate on the job at hand, specialized generalist, and we want them to be brilliant. So, you know, we need to deliberately develop the organization, deliberately develop the people in the organization. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. Again, this is a big area we're looking at here, but just have a quick look through. Yeah, the socialized mind, the self-authoring mind, and the self-transforming mind. I have mentioned these things in webinar 3 when I was talking about developing oneself as an agile leader. So a socialized mind is what I think I need to send will be strongly influenced by what I believe others want to hear. So I'm going to operate in the organization, and I'm always going to be thinking about what other people want to hear and then saying that. Self-authoring mind is there's still an element of that. You know, what I send, what I emails, communication, verbal communication is a function of what I deem others need to or ought to hear. Yeah. So here's my opinion, and I'm going to broadcast that out. The self-transforming mind is stand back and basically filter. Try and take your own cognitive resonance out of it, your own belief system out of it, and try and look at your own belief system from a helicopter view and the organization's belief system from a helicopter view, and then think about, how does that support the values-based management and the direction of travel. So, excuse me, Keegan and Lacey talk about this far better than I just did there, but we can see there that based on their analysis, 58% of organizations really operate, they have people operating around a socialized mind, 35% self-authoring, and only 1% self-transforming. So quite interesting. If you want to understand more about this area that I've just introduced here, this is the book to read, An Everyone Culture. And the idea in the Everyone Culture is that, coaching and development programs aren't just for the senior directors or senior managers, it's for everything. We're all moving together, we're all continuously developing ourselves, and the business has very much a focus on developing people in the business. So obviously we're making sure we're providing the right products at the right time for the customer, but we are also concentrating on evolving our own people in the business. So, a key element for nurturing an agile culture. Fifth discipline, again, I'm sure many of you have heard of this idea. I've mentioned systems thinking quite a few times as we've been going through the webinar. Yes. Oh, fantastic! Lewis has given us. I'm not sure what the link is. Where? Oh, there we are. Great stuff. Lean Startup Innovation Successful Businesses. Brilliant. On Amazon. That's the book. Great. Thanks very much, Lewis. And then Sherry Ann, Fixed and Growth Mindset. Good to nurture children as well. Yeah, that's my practical experience of having two kids. Mine. I say both my kids are now grown up, but yes, certainly back in the day, that certainly aligns to my experience. Brilliant stuff. So let's just have a look at another idea to do with nurturing an agile culture. Peter Senge, he's the dude, or one of the major dudes when you're talking about systems thinking. Fifth discipline. So in the long run, the only sustainable competitive advantage is your organization's ability to learn faster than competition, otherwise known as evolution. So evolution is as true in business as it is in anything else. Yes, we need to have the ability to learn faster. What does that mean? That means we need to have a culture within which people can be innovative and creative, and they feel safe that they can learn, they can make mistakes. This is one diagram that describes the fifth discipline. So obviously personal mastery is discipline number one. Mastering a particular thing, specialized generalist, yes. Team learning is discipline number two. So we share what we've learned. We have an ethos that, specialized generalist ethos. Mental model is number three. Exchange unwanted values for new and applicable values. So we figure out what values work for us as a team, or for us as a program, or for us as an organization, and then we align into those values, the IBM sort of thinking. Discipline number four, shared vision. So as I was saying, in my experience for a business, you've got to have a clear direction of travel. And that doesn't need to be defined to any great level of mega detail, but it needs to be clear. Here are our values in our business, and here is our direction of travel. And then when we talk to people about whether they want to work with us as a business, we can say, here are our values, here's our direction of travel. Does that work for you? Is it something that we can help you with to, enhance and build your career? And is it something that you think you can help us with? So yes, we need to have that shared vision, certainly. And then systems thinking is the fifth discipline. Interdependence and basically working together as a whole system. Now, that's tracking back to what I drew a little bit earlier on. We need to make sure that when we're driving change in the organization, excuse me, it's done in vertical slices and it's driving down the value chains. So it's not just being done in one part of the business. Now, again, what we're looking at here is some big ideas very, very quickly, and this is nowhere near all the ideas that you would need for an agile culture, nurturing an agile culture, but these are sort of like real biggies. So I'm not planning to read everything that's on this slide again. If you just have a look, if it piques your interest, then have a look at Senji's work. Let's just have a look at a few of them. So today's problems come from yesterday's solutions. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've definitely found this in business over the years. What worked well 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, may be holding us back significantly now. So yes, we always need to be looking at the market. We always need to be making sure that we're developing the right products. Design thinking, agile design thinking, is one sort of idea we can use there. The harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. We'll have a look at that in a few minutes. The cure can be worse than the disease. Definitely. So we need to understand what the cultural baselines are for the organization. Faster absolutely can be slower. So in other words, the idea there is if we're just hacking things left, right, and centre, that can cause us very significant problems later on. You know, the classic within information technology and digital solutions is we try and do things far too quickly, and what therefore happens is we build what's called technical debt into the assets that we create. Now, the problem with technical debt, which basically means this thing doesn't work technically very well. It might work functionally very well, but it doesn't work technically very well. It's not well designed, it's not well architected, all that sort of stuff. It might mean we can get this particular product out quickly now, but it's going to cause us big problems later on because it's got loads of defects. It's going to be really hard to scale. It's going to be really hard to extend. So yeah, faster, sadly, quite often, you know, can quite often be slower in the long run. Yeah, there's no blame. I love this one. I quite like all of these because some of them are quite light-hearted. Dividing an elephant in half does not produce two small elephants. It produces one dead elephant. So yes, so 11 laws of systems thinking, I would suggest is certainly worth looking at from an agile cultural perspective. Just bear with me. I'm just going to have a quick look at chat. I can see a few chats here. The second one is this push and pull. Just bear with me a second. The second one, the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. It's not really push and pull. What we're talking about with a push and a pull system is, in a push system, you push work into the teams. In a demand pull system, you pull work through the teams. So in other words, as the customer demands something to be delivered, that pulls the work through the team, a demand pull system. So we're talking here about lean thinking. So if you want to understand more about demand pull systems, lean thinking, I'm really talking here about, Senji is really talking here about culture. And what I mean by that is, if we're trying to force a change into the business, if we try and push that change into the business, but people don't understand it and they don't see the benefit, they're going to push back really hard. So the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. I've sort of mentioned this. I've mentioned this in a few earlier webinars. In that people really need to understand why we're doing this, and they need to see some factual evidence of why this is a better way of working. And the skilled leader, the really skilled leader, is changing the team or the organization, but the organization or the team think they're changing themselves. Let me just reiterate that, if I may. The really skilled leader is changing the team or the organization, but the organization or team think they are changing themselves. That's when the real skill comes in. So on to chat again, if we could. I'm going to look at a few ideas. We've talked about a few ideas there about agile culture. I'm going to look at a few cultural ideas about sort of changing the culture. I'm going to go through pretty quickly. So just on to chat, what's worked well for you when shifting or nurturing an agile culture? What sort of things can you share with everybody else about shifting or changing an agile culture? Pull is autonomous. Me being dim, I don't totally understand that one, but yes, you may well be right there, Karthik. Yes. The Justin Bieber effect. Yeah, pushing change. Yep. Brilliant. Yeah. So all right. So cool. All right. I'm not seeing many points being raised this time, so that's absolutely fine. How do you shift a culture? Well, we need to think about defining the vision, the direction of travel, as we've suggested. We've talked about taking consistent small actions, vertical slices. In other words, transform to an agile culture by being agile. That is one of my big things that I share with, when I work with transformational experts and I work with people doing transformation programs. That's probably the biggest lesson. Do not use traditional big bang approaches to do any sort of transformational change, because it very rarely works. We need to do continuous improvement as we go forward. Yeah. Organizational iceberg is something I mentioned in webinar 4, I think it was, but just have a little bit of a further look at this. So the idea of the organizational iceberg, as I suggested, is the culture is largely the part of the iceberg you can't see. The easy things to change, the visible formal system, the org chart, the roles, the processes, the tools, this sort of stuff. The risk is if we move that visible formal system, into a new agile structure or whatever it is, but we don't move the culture, the risk is that a visible formal system will just sink. Yes, it's just a matter of time, because people don't understand why they're doing this. They don't understand why the cultural aspect should change. So what we need to do is find a way of moving the bottom of the iceberg. Now, the way I would typically do that is the sort of things I've been talking about, but also using factual evidence. We're going to be working in vertical slices. So, you know, we can sell this change as experiments, and experiments that learn. So we're not trying to change the whole organization in one hit. So we can move the visible formal system of one part of the business, a vertical slice, then use the factual observable evidence that things are getting better, and use that to anchor the change back in the culture. So anchoring the change is step number 8 in Kotter's change process. So we can use the factual evidence to anchor the change in the culture and then pull the culture along. We can then make another small change to the visual formal system, do the same thing, anchor the culture, move the culture along. Another small change, move the culture along. Another small change, move the culture along. So we are constantly thinking about moving the culture as well as moving the organization chart. Yeah, a really key point. We've only got 4 minutes or so left. I'll not go through these slides in detail. I'll just put them up so you can see them when you look at the recording. I am recording this webinar in the same way I've been recording all of them, so you'll be able to see the video later. The idea here is that we need to understand patterns of behavior, structure of the system, mental models, the current situation, the desired direction of travel that we want to go, and then we need to think about that. So again, this is pretty simple thinking at this level that we're talking about on the webinar, but the 4 key variables affecting your culture is people, relatedness, belonging, place, space and time that we're in at the moment, what's happening in the market. You know, an obvious one at the moment is COVID-19 nightmare. Practices, what are the rituals and habits? Excuse me, I'm not talking specifically here about we do process A followed by process B followed by function 1. I'm talking here about what are the rituals and habits that we generally observe in the organization, things that people might not be actually cognitively aware of. And then the plots and the pictures. What's the narratives that we tell? Stories, photos. How do we demonstrate being agile? Do we have a self-sustaining cycle of being agile? All that sort of good stuff. So yeah, brilliant. There's a question here from Karen. How do you measure this transformation, its direction of travel? I will definitely look at that in later in later webinars. Measurement is absolutely key, and suffice to just say for now, the measurement in an agile organization, the things you would measure would be very, very different in business agility to that which you would traditionally measure. Great stuff. Okay, so let's move forward because we haven't got a lot of time left. Resistance in a human being is natural. You know, we are designed, our brains are designed to survive, belong, become. I can never read I always abagadala. I can never read these, get these words correct. But basically, what I'm trying to put across here is, don't be upset as a leader or a transformation specialist when people resist change. It's because of the way you're trying to implement the change. It doesn't make them a bad person. You know, human beings are hardwired to not mess up and you think I'm lost and I'm freaking out about this and all these sorts of things. So we need to be very cognizant of these things. So really quickly, just really to put the slides up, a change toolkit. You need to think about what is the style of change that you're going to be looking for. Are you going to use a sort of like a pragmatic approach? Are you going to be using a very visionary approach? Are you going to be using more of a conservation of what's going on now approach? You need to be thinking about that. So that's, you know, what's the style of the change we're going to be implementing? What's the difficulty? You should be looking at the difficulty of what you're trying to do. So obviously, amount of disruption on the vertical axis, time to acclimate on the bottom axis. Green, so not a huge amount of disruption and pretty quick to acclimate. Little effort, yeah. Over here, more effort. Orange, red there on the top right. So loads of disruption and loads of time to acclimate. A load of effort over a long time. So we need to understand the difficulty of the change. I was talking about this one a little bit earlier on today on this webinar. The change motivation, what's the desire to change as opposed to the choice? So obviously where you get big problems is where there's no desire to change. People don't understand why you're changing and you're trying to mandate it on people. That's when people really dig their heels in. And in the worst scenario, you won't be aware that they've dug their heels in. In other words, you think things are changing, but you're measuring the wrong stuff. Things aren't actually changing. So you need to understand the change motivation. Haven't got time to go through these, but I'll just put the slides up very quickly so you can have a look. In essence, what the point this is making is something I did mention a little bit earlier. Excuse me. If you try and do all the change at once, it's a very high risk thing to do. You could do a long, steady trek, but what we really aim for is continuous change. So small change waves occurring continuously. And then that will create the big change via the small change. In other words, change adds up. Again, some brilliant comments raised once again, and thanks very much to all of you for being here. Just very quickly, Radtac, yes, we are the premier Agile transformation consultancy, provide learning development, obviously, example practitioners, so Scrum Masters, product owners, all that sort of stuff, and consultancy and coaching to help organizations transform. We are globally based. So just to finish ourselves off, as we're on 1:30 now, yeah, we've just looked at nurturing an agile culture, or some ideas in this area. Hopefully it's been useful to you. It's been fun for me. There's been some great comments raised again. Next thing we're going to look at is major agile scaling frameworks: Scrums, Nexus, Less, Scrum at Scale, Safe. Key one there is scaling by descaling. You can see there very early on, scaling by descaling. So we'll have a look at some of that stuff. Yeah, it just really remains for me to say thanks very much to everyone once again for coming along to this webinar. Hopefully I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for making all your comments.